Hey, Soul Sister, we are back with another special episode. I have Brad Axelrad in the house. Hello, Brad. So good to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Curious where our conversation is going to go today.
Yeah, we've been having a juicy conversation pre-recording, which is typically what happens. I've been following Brad on Instagram and on Facebook for a while, and just like, who is this dude? And like, wow, what a life he's living! And he seems so fearless and facing fear. And I love bringing people onto this platform to talk about fear, breaking through fear, using fear, how to maximize our life. And I just thought you were a perfect fit. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let me give just a snippet of who you are, and then you could share a little bit more about your journey. So, Brad's been working with consultants, and he's a podcast host of a thing called Face Your Dragon. I can't wait to hear more about that. He supports coaches, visionary entrepreneurs to truly have a business that sets them free to live a life of fulfillment and truth. So yes, that's what he does. And we are going to dive into what is it about the facing life, facing the dragon and using fear, because at the end of the day, whether it's business, whether it's love, whether it's our health, it's all the same thing. So would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. It's fear or love. We're either, at the simplest level, we're either, courageously loving or we're in fear.
Courageously loving or we're in fear, boom, right there. Take that down. And I know you've interviewed some spectacular people like Don Miguel Ruiz and Ariel Ford. Ariel was on my podcast as well as cool. Among other people. So you've been hanging with some cool people, and now you get to hang with me and my girls.
The best one yet.
There you go. All right. So why don't we start with how did you get into this work and maybe a little bit of your journey?
The short answer is massive pain. And we all had a childhood. We all had parents that didn't know what the hell they were doing. They did their best. And at about 30, it was finally time to make some serious shifts in my life. I'd been to Tony Robbins once before that and was like, wow, this is amazing. What is this freedom from self-development? What is this energy? It's not a bar. It's not a club. It's like, what is this thing?
Uh-huh.
And so I had many friends actually in the club scene of all places in San Francisco. I'm just going to click my WhatsApp off. Forgot to do that.
Sure.
And his friend said, Brad, it sounds like you'd be ready to go to the Hoffman Institute. And I said, I don't know what that is. And I kept seeing him, and he was the most peaceful, grounded, kind of centered, like angel energy I'd ever experienced from a person, especially out in the club scene in San Francisco, electronic music club scene in San Francisco. And so I looked into it, and I eventually went, and it changed the entire fabric of my existence, internally, externally. Hoffman is an 8-day deep dive, now 7 days. It's all about your childhood, understanding the patterns that we either model or rebel against with our parents. And it's understanding at our core that our overactive intellect is offsetting this wounded emotional child aspect in us, and getting a truce between them is really where it's at, and just relieving so much of your childhood imprinting and patterning. We can go deeper into it, but that's the short answer. That the Hoffman process showed me the way to the light and a path of freedom.
I'm doing Hoffman in January.
Oh, really? Okay.
I am. And, I've had people, and I just have to say this, I've had a lot of people say, well, why are you doing it? You've done all this. I do shadow work. I do this deep dive work. I've been facilitated and working on my shit for years about the patterns and all the shadows. Sure. And I always say there are layers. And by the way, Tony, I've done pretty much everything with Tony, including his coaching program. And
cool.
there's always more. And there's these, as I say, it's like a garden, and you pull out the weeds, but those roots go deep, deep, deep down. And so for me, I'm always learning and growing. And that's why I do the podcast. And that's why I bring on people like you, because not all paths are the same, and each one might bring a different piece to the puzzle. So I love that you said that because I'm just so excited about January. And now I'm like even more excited.
Oh,
Woo,
you have
bring it
no
on.
idea.
Bring
Yeah,
it
look,
on.
I've produced over 200 live events with some of the biggest thought and business leaders on the planets and on the planet, and attended well over 100 workshops, seminars, and conferences, and
Yeah.
plant medicine ceremonies and conventions. The whole thing. Nothing comes remotely close to the transformation that the Hoffman process provides. I'll go and do 5 or 10 other things, and then I go back to Hoffman. I'm like, why did I even spend any more time, energy, and money anywhere else? I should have just gone back there.
Uh,
It's subterranean. All this other stuff is deep, and it's important, and it's relevant. It gives us some tools. It gives us some healing, but it doesn't get to the core.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's what
Hoffman
it
gets
is.
there.
Oh my God. Now I'm even more excited. Woohoo.
Yeah, I want to add this little piece. So I loved it so much that 36 hours after my father passed, I watched him take his last breath, and I was at the Q2, which was the second follow up to the Hoffman process. 36 hours later, I was there watching, crying just after seeing him take his last breath. I was there at the Hoffman process, and I'm like, this is amazing. I need to be here. This is the spot. And people are looking at me like, why is this guy crying? We haven't even started yet. Like, what's going on?
I
And
love
of
it.
course, throughout the couple of days, they found out it was one of the hardest, darkest moments of my life. But the point is, I wanted to keep it in my life so much that I raised my hand to become the Orange County, California graduate facilitator. So I was the Hoffman process graduate facilitator for 2 years because I really wanted to be in purpose and contributing that incredible work to people ongoingly, and selfishly keeping it in my life. And that's what's so good about having a purpose and being in contribution, is that we're healing along the way.
Yeah. Oh my God. So well said and so beautiful. I love it. I love it. And now I'm just like, yay, I'm so excited. So I love your answer about, when it had to do with your journey. I love it because it's the answer I usually give people. They're like, well, tell us about your journey. How did it start? And I'm like, well, lots of pain,
For
and,
sure.
and that's the journey. That's, we all have these lives and we have these experiences. And then there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of what people think of making the same mistakes or the choices that they made, fear of falling down the same hole, all the different things that are in our unconscious mind kind of pulling the strings. And I'm just wondering, what are some of your fears? What are some of the fears that you faced in the past that you had to overcome or even leverage? Because you even talk about leveraging hidden fears to have a fulfilled life.
Yeah. I come from extreme sports, and I was almost a professional motocross racer, which is the number one most physically demanding sport on the planet. And I was all in, and you're facing your fear constantly on the motocross track or on a really steep ski hill or whatever it is, street bike. But all that stuff is like physical fear. The deeper, more challenging fears, and one that I have learned that is my greatest gift, is what I like to say: what you're most resisting and most afraid of are the very things that'll set you free. It's your money maker, your gift to humanity, and your purpose on the planet. So if we can look inside what those things are, or observe where those are showing up in our lives. So that for me was public speaking. I was terrified of public speaking, even though I've done it well over 300 times, and small and large audiences, and on podcasts and stages, standing next to Michael Gerber or all these other, Ali Brown, all these greats.
Wow.
Public speaking is the number one fear above dying. And people would never know that I have that fear. I'm even excited and nervous and fearful right now, but really, notice I said excited first, because fear is excitement without the breath. You and I did a couple breaths before we got on here. And even I'm noticing that I'm not breathing as deeply as I could.
Exactly.
I'm not slowing down enough. Now, I like to get energized and hyped up. It's kind of a state that Tony gets us in, just as an example. It's important to have that high energy sometimes, not always. But fear is excitement without the breath. So anytime I would get on stage and be terrified, I would just make sure I would try to slow down and take some breaths and do something called speaking circles by Lee Glickstein, where I'm just slowing down and communicating with one person at a time. And I'm noticing these roots go down through my body into the earth and then up into them. And we're having a conversation, just one person at a time. And then we would complete that conversation. And then I would move to the next person and have this intimate conversation with them. So the reason I'm sharing this is that it works on stage. It works now on a podcast. It works in a networking event. It can work at a Tupperware party. I'm using that term loosely, but when the ladies get together to do the thing, and if you might be a little nervous because you might be an introvert, let's say, or have some social anxiety or had an argument with your husband, whatever it is, just that connecting to yourself and to the ground and to the person in front of you can really be calming and soothing and centering and healing.
Oh my God, absolutely. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, this is such a huge tool. And I always mention breath, and to be able to be so present and conscious when people are on dates, when people are meeting someone for the first time, or even more charge is when you're dating someone or in a relationship with someone and there's an issue, and you have to take a stand for something that matters to you. And you have to kind of venture into that conversation that you might be scared to have, that the ability to, to slow down, to get centered and grounded, and to be able to connect to your heart so that you can actually have that conscious connection with that person. It's a game changer. It's a true game changer. Yeah. I was thinking when you were talking, I was an actress. Well, I am an actress. I'll always be an actress.
Nice.
Yeah. And they used to have to hold the show for me because my fear of being on the stage, I would be in the bathroom. Wow. I will not go into too many details, but suffice it to say, I remember this one show and I was with my mom. I think I was 15 or 16. And I'm like, I couldn't get out of the bathroom and they had to hold the show. And I learned that I couldn't go to the bathroom an hour before the show. Otherwise, I would never get out because I was just terrified of public speaking. And what you were saying, there was something you said before, and it doesn't, all I remember is thinking, I did something you may not know, but it was such a huge facing my fear that I got naked and body painted by a well-known body painter, did a mini documentary, a 9-minute documentary on body image and body shame. And the fear of letting the whole world see me in that way was terrifying and exhilarating. And it came down to, how do I want to live? What do I want to break through? What is the message I want to bring out into the world? Best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever did. Yeah. Yeah. Is there one of those for you? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. What I've found is that, exposure therapy is really important, right? If we're afraid of speaking, afraid of heights, I'm still afraid of heights, but there's certain things that I will face. I'm still haven't jumped out of an airplane or bungee jumped. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but
do you want to? I mean, is that something you want to do?
I don't know. It's almost beyond, it just feels like straight terror to me. It doesn't feel like excitement, even though there's so much paradox and irony that I'm this guy that's all about facing fear. And yet, I don't know. When I rock climbed, it wasn't exhilarating. It was just terrifying, and it wasn't enjoyable. So I don't know that we have to always do everything we're afraid of. I think there's some things that can convert into an amazing experience, but some things are just straight terror. I think we need to know the difference and have boundaries and clarity within ourselves to know the difference between intuition and fear. And that's that delicate balance between, am I just afraid, or is that a sign? And forgive me, ladies, but I sometimes experience women personally that are using the excuse of, it's a sign, or it's my intuition. And I'm like, are you sure? I think it kind of showing up a little bit more like fear, like
it's a hard thing to pull apart sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. And with women having safety, security, and stability and certainty, like the highest thing above everything. And this is what I was sort of asking if we could go into before we got on this, like how much I could challenge the listeners and watchers around this conversation, being a male and just sharing some male perspective. There's this whole movement around, men that we're supposed to get in touch with our heart, the 12 inches between this and this, like we're the toxic masculinity thing, which is thankfully sort of gone away. The Me Too movement has sort of gone away. There's a little more balance, but the point is, the toxic masculinity is that of men getting into their feelings and communicating their feelings and not being aggressive or angry or dominating or controlling whatever the core toxic masculinity sort of trait box is. And I agree with that. I think we should be getting in touch with our heart and becoming softer and more communicative and more community focused instead of lone wolf. But what I'm saying is that on the other side of that pendulum, it's been this, we've been demonizing the men and the masculine, even though it's not core masculine, it's sort of a primal aspect of our masculine makeup.
Yeah.
But there's toxic femininity. And what I mean by that is that when there's so much fear running any person's lives, but in particular, I notice a lot of women are very afraid. They're afraid to get jumped, rightfully so, raped, whatever it is, mugged. I get all that. But I also know many women that have transcended their fears. Many women that I live in Mexico, they're traveling alone. They don't live in that paradigm. Now, maybe they're stupid or ignorant, and that could get them in a lot of trouble, but I haven't witnessed that. If that fear vibration isn't there, we're not typically going to attract something bad to us. So there's that subconscious thing running that's reverberating out and from our subconscious that could potentially be attracting bad things to us. So I'm going to say, just close this with this. It's super important, I feel, ladies, to finally recognize that safety, security, and stability and certainty is best not projected onto the man or anything outside of you, maybe other than God, to create a level of peace in yourself that will allow us to relax around you. I mean, sure, I guess we're the provider. We can be the provider, protector, all this stuff. But again, you're putting your power outside of yourself onto us, which you can't control other people or other situations. All you can control is yourself. And it's just going to create a different level of flow and relationship if you get right with the fact that there is no certainty, there is no safety. Just let go and let God, because that's the only divine power that will make us actually safe, is surrender.
Yeah. Okay. So you just laid down a lot there. And I just had Coot Blackson on talking about surrender.
Oh, I love Coot.
Yeah. He was great. It was a wonderful interview. And there's a yes and. So yes, absolutely, about connecting and surrendering and trusting and aligning. And I always say that safety is an inside job. Trust is an inside job to be able, when we have our own back and we are aligned, then we can open. And yes, the fear, the unconscious, all the stuff we've accumulated can come out as unhealthy, over controlling, micromanaging. And then of course, what happens with men a lot of the times, it's like the classic male female thing. It's like the women want to connect and the men pull back, because how women are connecting, how they're presenting can come across as stepping on toes or trying to change men and demanding the list. And that's where a lot of women I do see get challenged. And that's why they work with me, is like, how can they become their inner soulmate so that they can relax and open and have a different type of relationship, healthy femininity, owning that. And to throw the ball back to the unhealthy masculinity. Yes, I get the toxic masculine that has been presented. Bottom line, how I view it is, we're just all bringing our shadows and our crap to the relationships. Men are going to pull back, shut down, not have access to their hearts, because ultimately they're terrified of not being accepted for who they are, and they want to be free, and they to open up, they need to relax as well. I had John Gray talking about that too. So to me, it's like we all have to do our friggin' work. We all have to face our fears so that we can connect in a healthy way.
No way around it. Yeah. So the Hoffman process goes into a lot of these things. It's like, where do you learn that pattern from, right? The pattern of fear, the pattern of anger, the pattern of shutdown. It's like, was it mom? Was it dad? So yeah, it's brilliant work.
Yeah. And I'm like really geeking out on Terry Real's work. Are you familiar with Terry at all?
No.
Oh, you're gonna love his work. His recent best-selling book is called Us, US. And my therapist said, you got to read it. I'm like, it's about couples counseling. He's like, read it. And it's all about, we want to be in our adult self. However, under stress in relationships, and we're not even just talking about intimate relationships. We're talking about all the people in our life. However, he talks about couples that when we get triggered, when something happens and there's a charge, we go into our adaptive child. We go
Yeah.
into the, whether it was we were abandoned as kids or whatever the story is. And so what he said, and I love this, is when we're there and you're in this dynamic and you both have this unhealed stuff, it becomes this dynamic of more and more. The more she goes forward and goes, we need to talk, the more he backs up. It could be the other way around as well.
Yeah,
However, that anxious
totally.
attachment, it's like, and that's me. It's like, well, I shouldn't say that's me, but that's what I'm working on is how do
Yep.
I hold myself when I'm feeling in my fear and like, oh, it's like,
Uh, I know
you
it well.
know,
Yeah, the anxious attachment, which I've worked through quite a bit of that, and codependency was something I didn't really understood I had till about 10 years ago when I read, I think it was Pia Melody's book, Facing Codependency. That was brilliant work just to
yeah,
understand. Yeah, like I'm
yeah,
noticing a little sadness around that, for many reasons. The breakdowns that are there, the desire to help and serve people that most of the time comes from a pure place, but not always. The heroes, the drama triangle, I forget the actual clinical term, but the hero savior, the victim perpetrator, and how we are constantly going in and out of this triangle, and where we place ourselves and how we'll place others in it, and how we run these cycles with people. And I love one thing that the Hoffman process said that was so brilliant around this. It's like, with patterns, or what they call negative love patterns, with patterns of behavior that don't serve us, we will do them to ourselves, or we'll do it to ourselves, we'll do it to others, or we'll set people up to do it to us. And it's just like one of the most brilliant things, because I can see it. It's like, or I'll play like a level of narcissism with somebody, and it's like, okay, where's that aspect in me that's got on the spectrum of narcissism, and I'm doing that to myself, and then I'm doing it to others, and then they're doing it to me, and I'm like, hey, it's like you can watch all of these things play out. And thankfully, awakened souls like you and I and everybody watching has the courage to look within enough to say, okay, where am I being that too? It's not always the other person, because a lot of people flip around the, he's a narcissist, she's a
huge,
narcissist. And
huge.
unfortunately, I've experienced a couple, and it's a freaking nightmare. Like, it's torture. Even one that I think was borderline personality disorder, and it was absolute hell. I mean, there's nothing
Yeah.
short of hell. Uh,
There's a
so
lot of
those things
people
are very,
relating to that right now, by the way.
yeah, I bet. It's very real, and I want to give you
Yeah.
permission that the victim shaming thing that happens a lot in these. It's like, oh, he's a narcissist. Oh, you're just saying that because you read about it and whatever, on Facebook. But it's very real, and the more we can understand and heal that aspect in ourselves. But this is the trick: when we actually look at ourselves and say, where am I being borderline or narcissistic or selfish? Instead of always accusing them, we might see how we're part of this cycle, but it is also very unconscious, and we're rooting it up through this deep, dark, shadowy place that we play
Exactly.
out with people,
100%. And that's what I'm always saying as a shadow worker. It's like, look at who triggers you. Look at who gets under your skin. Doesn't mean that their behavior is okay. I'm just saying, what is it about them that's triggering,
Yeah.
and bring it home, because there's a lesson there. What have you lost access to? What have you said? Why? What is it about them that's like, oh my God, it's such a horrible behavior? And you mentioned codependency. I mean, it's something that I need to be aware of, because I tend to gravitate to highly confident, amazing, narcissistic kind of guys. And I mean, I'm further down the line, down the path than I was years ago. And yet my ex-husband, when I look at that dynamic, I was drawn to him because he was
Yeah.
so confident. And why?
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, I'm so without confidence. And it's like, I want that. And then I can be like, well, look at him, blame him for the demise, blame him for all of his, qualities. And it's like, well, wait a second. What did I bring to the table, and what's unhealed in me so that I don't do that again?
Yeah. I'm noticing some sadness from many different past situations that what you were just sharing, like business partners, lovers,
Yeah.
girlfriends, And then it just weaves all these other layers of coping mechanisms when we're, it's like that
Yeah.
all that behavior of a narcissist is a coping mechanism because of their lack of true self-love and
Yeah.
connection to their heart and zero empathy. Like they're seeking something, and every behavior has a payoff somewhere, and it's
Yeah.
just some sort of biochemical payoff. If you study Joe Dispenza, like, we're
I
doing
love
something to
Joe.
get
Yeah.
some sort of chemical feedback, right?
Exactly.
So,
And it is sad, because ultimately we all just want to connect and
yeah,
be loved and give love. And I mean, that's why I do what I do, because I truly believe that's what we're meant to experience fully as human beings. I don't think we raised our hands to say let's become human beings to just live a life of fear and mediocrity.
yeah.
So I'm right there with you. So I'm curious, with all that you've experienced. I mean, this is your jam. This is you've been sharing so honestly about some of the things that have moved through you. How have you faced your dragon? How have you set yourself free? I mean, I hear that you're still working some things, as we
Of
always
course.
are, and yet you've done some pretty amazing breakthroughs for yourself.
Uh, finding a way to be in massive contribution and service was one of the biggest sort of like bigger shifts. But to get a little more granular, I mean, the Hoffman process, I did it the process, and then I did Q2 twice, and then I did the facilitator training once, and then I was attending and leading groups. So the point is, like, I got it deep in the muscle and spent hundreds of hours around what I knew was the deepest work on the planet to date. There may be something deeper, but I've yet to find it. So again, highly recommending that. I can't recommend it enough. I pray everybody goes to the hoffmaninstitute.org, just to check it out. Not the Hoffman Institute. And then, a lot of plant medicine. I found that sometimes we can't get access to the deeper parts of our resistant, I'm not going to die ego aspect, personality aspect of ourselves. And it takes something to pierce through that. So ayahuasca, 5-MeO DMT is a really profound substance that I hope everybody looks into.
I don't know what that say. What was that one? I don't know that
Yeah,
one.
so the number 5 and then MEO DMT. So it's actually Bufo alvarius toad.
Oh,
It's
yes, I do know toad medicine. Yes, I
toad
didn't know.
medicine.
Yeah.
And so there's a movie you can go watch for free. It's on YouTube now, but just put in the spirit molecule, Joe Rogan, and it'll pop up for free and you can watch it. It's fascinating. He did a great job in 2010 bringing this to the world. But thankfully, psychedelics are starting to open up a little more. They're decriminalizing, or it actually passed, or something is going to be signed in California to decriminalize a lot of psychedelics. And it's already happened in some cities, Portland, I think, and Denver, and some other area in Oakland. So that's one way. But the point is piercing the veil of the resistance that we're sometimes holding on to so hard. So plant medicine is access to facing your dragon. Hoffman, near-death experiences, unfortunately, like we've had these defining moments where something's been tickling us for a long time and we ignore it. We get hit by a brick and we're able to shake the brick off. And then if we keep ignoring something, or the God whisper, the calling, we'll get taken out by a Mack truck. So what I'm saying is, try to listen and have the courage to step into that intuitive nudge, like they said in The Secret. Act on that right in that moment when it's there. You can feel it. Have the courage to step in, even if it doesn't make sense. Just trust that knowing and move.
Yeah. Different tools, different paths. And I've done so many of the different paths. Like I said, I'm doing the Hoffman. And one of the most confronting experiences I ever had was with ayahuasca. It was like, whoa, and so, so everybody who's listening, it's like, we're not saying go have ayahuasca and go to, it's like, just keep going, keep facing, keep leaning in. Because it's, as we say, life happens outside your comfort zone. It's like we really encourage you to just keep stretching, because there's so much freedom And breath when we can really face these things. And
Yes.
yeah, and that's why I
Mm.
do what I do, because fear sucks. And yet fear works for us if we know how to
Yeah.
dance with it and
Yeah.
find what it's really about. And you talk about that. You talk about
I
actually
do.
befriending your fear.
Yeah, so let's go into that for a second. So I when I first started the faceyourdragon .com platform and brand, I was like, what do coaches and entrepreneurs and speakers and messengers experience? Like, well, they're afraid to speak or talk on a podcast or share on a video or charge what they're worth or public speaking. They have all these fears. And I listed out like 30 of them because I've been in this space a long time, and I experienced a lot of them myself, all of them myself, and watched a lot of others. But it wasn't that. I had a very wise mentor friend of mine. He's got a great name of Charles Bronson. No, he's not the actor, but that's his name. Very dear brother. And he says, Brad, it's underneath that. It's not the fear of public speaking, it's something else. So he and I did an exercise, and then over a couple of weeks, I kind of got clear that it's these 5 things at its core. So it's imposter, scarcity, value, unheard, and critics. So in any aspect of your life, these are sort of running us. Imposter can show up in many different ways. Who am I to be on this dance floor? I don't dance salsa, and I'm like, oh, yeah, even here in Mexico, I have that, because it's new to me. We all have the imposter syndrome at some level.
At some level, yeah.
Scarcity. Do you want me to just go through these?
Go for it. Yeah.
Cool. So scarcity can show up in a lot of ways. And this is something I've just experienced recently in a relationship, just the fear of being broke or poor at some point. And I noticed that a lot of women, especially Latin and Hispanic women, and some cultures, money is like this big thing, and the man's the provider. And there's this dynamic of scarcity there, and it really creates an uncomfortable situation that I think is unnecessary, but it's cultural programming, it's childhood programming, it's religious programming. So scarcity can show up in a lot of ways. Value is the third one, and that I'm just not valuable in some way. People won't see what I'm worth. They're not going to value me in relationship, just like all the other times I'm going to not be valuable and I'll be taken advantage of in some way, or people won't buy for me. Unheard, same thing. We all want to be heard. That's like a core thing next to belonging being the highest driver of humans. Unheard, being heard is so important. And forgive me for saying this, we all need it, but especially women, we need to hold the space for you to really emote it out. I think of John Gray. I introduced him at the Association of Transformational Leaders years ago in Ojai on stage. I brought him up on stage, but the point is, the unheard dragon is like this, man, I just want to be heard. I want you to just listen. Don't respond. Just hear me.
Yeah.
So, and these are more for business, but they show up everywhere. And then critics.
But before you get to the critics, I just was thinking, I was just thinking of Tony Robbins, and he, when he talks about relationships, and he calls it the storm, the female storm. And, when he's talking to the guys in the audience, he goes, this is going to change your life. Just hold the space. You don't have to remember anything, which is a little, but you don't just let it rip and just be present, because that's what she needs. She needs your presence. She doesn't need, how to fix it. She doesn't need your 2 cents unless she asks for it. Just hold the space. And I get that sometimes our storms are big, and hopefully when we do this inner work, my storms have gotten very, very small. But when they go, it's like, there's some high winds,
Yeah, I really want to speak to the beauty of being a man when a woman's in her storm, though, because I find that some women have disconnected from their ability to trust themselves to storm.
Yes.
Almost like they think it's, I shouldn't be that emotional. It's bad. It's wrong. Society's sort of stamped down the
100%.
Yeah, so I welcome it. I'd rather be around a very emotive woman because that puts me right into my masculine to be in the space, unless she's violent or like, I mean, there's different levels of it. But the point is, like, the storm of this raw vulnerability and the need to be heard and the need to be felt and like the need for space to be held. Like, I want that so badly and I welcome it. So women, please bring that. And I get that you're afraid that you're not safe if you do, because maybe your man can't handle it. Totally understand that too. But I welcome it. I want it. I cherish
Oh,
that,
I'm
because
so
now I
glad
have
you
an
said that.
option to be needed. And that's one of our core drivers. I think John Gray talks about that, is to be needed.
Yeah.
And if you're so strong and so like neutral and more on the masculine side, there's no space for us to feel needed, to step up, to be chivalrous, to be supportive, to be in our power.
Thank you. I am so, so glad. We'll get to the critic in a second, but this is so juicy. Seriously, it's
Good.
like the women need to hear this. And
Cool.
it's what I share often, which, the women that come to me, they've learned how to be independent. They have their shit together. They come in with such masculine energy a lot of
Yep.
the times that the men are like, where do I fit? Where do I go? And there was, again, Tony, it was on stage. I remember this. And he brought up 5 guys, and there was a woman that was in huge masculine energy and, bitch, masculine energy. And she was just like
Boss babe.
edgy, boss
Yeah.
babe. Yeah. Edge, edge, edge. And the men are just like standing there with their arms crossed. And then whatever Tony did with his magic, she dropped and opened, and the
Uh,
tears, and you saw all
wow.
the men just lean forward. And of course he
Wow.
interviewed the men. I'm getting goosebumps because I remember this. And the men were like, I just wanted to hug her. I just wanted to be there for her. And
Mm,
this is the dance. If we can
yeah.
just keep opening. And
Yes.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it
yeah.
takes massive courage, ladies, to do this. And like this is the toxic femininity aspect. And I'm just picking on that because we got so harped on around. I'm using it playfully also, but like the aspect of um that courageous opening and devotion, even if the man isn't worthy of it. I promise you, if you're courageous enough to open and give us that, we will cherish you to the moon. But having any level of entitlement or expectations, and these are things I just kind of went through, like this level of lack of courageous feminine invitation, that's this generous offering of beautiful, sacred, divine, courageous, you have to
Mm,
be courageous here, feminine invitation. Even though it might be scary, you could get hurt. We just have to have the willingness to get hurt ultimately, because we always heal.
yeah.
And unfortunately, many people shut down, men and women. But I want to welcome you to open back up, even in the hurt. Like my throat chakra is really closed. Like I'm noticing some closure in my body right now from a personal reason. And like I'm opening this again because I want to feel open. I want to feel alive. I want to be connected. I want to feel love again. It's like
Mm.
we need to open back up, guys.
Yeah, yeah. And I just have to just jump in here again. That was so beautiful. About the toxic masculinity, because I'm going to say yes, 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 100%. I'm right there with you. And as women, we have been told we're too much. We've been told we're too emotional. And so
Mm,
we're bumping up against that. And that's what we need to heal.
interesting.
And men, I typically work mostly with women now. And yet in the past, when I worked with men, and certainly my male friends and colleagues, they've been hurt by the toxic female and the over controlling mom and all the stuff that they've gone through, the emasculation in their relationships. And so now they're walking on eggshells, and they have a wall that's like a huge fortress. So
Right.
it's a yes. And we all have, again,
Yep.
we all have to keep unpacking and looking. And what will it take for a man to go, here's a storm and I can hold this and lean in and open? Or if she has an issue, I can listen. And yeah, we all have our work to do. We all have our work to do. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's never ending too. The ego loves to think that we've arrived in some level. You may have arrived for a moment, but boy, that we're so far off path as soon as we think we've got it all figured out. We're done. Our goose is cooked then.
Yes, I know. And last night I was in my class, and I don't know how this came up, but I was saying how, there's always more work. And when it's that, beep, that's when your work ends. It's like when you're dead. Until
Yep.
that time, layers, layers,
Yep.
layers, layers. And that's the
Yep.
beauty of life. Tell us about the critic.
Okay. So critics, show up in the sense that, and I love Gay Hendricks when he was on the Face Your Dragon podcast. He talks a lot about sort of familial critics in the sense that we don't want to outshine others in our family. I have a different interpretation, but I love that. We don't want to. We'll hit our upper limit that he talks about in The Big Leap. He was guest number 2. Brilliant conversation, but we'll hit our upper limit, and we won't. We'll sabotage in some way, self-sabotage, and then we create a breakdown in relationship or in finance or in our physical health. And but anyway, so the critics show up in my world in a way that we create content or we put ourselves out there in some way in dating sites, social media, even in a friendship, Tupperware party. I'm again using that loosely and playfully, and we're afraid that we're going to get criticized. So, but ultimately, it's self-criticization. Is that right? Criticization.
I don't know, but that sounds good. And if it doesn't exist,
I think it works. I'm not sure I've ever used that word. So we are
good.
critical of self, and we're criticizing ourselves. And then, of course, that is that sort of, we're doing it to ourselves, we're doing it to others, but ultimately we're kind of criticizing others, and then we're going to set them up to criticize us. So we're creating, but the actual dragon is that if you do achieve the dream, you'll be criticized or your personal life will suffer. Yeah. So that looks like, if I create everything I've ever wanted in my life, I'm going to hit my glass ceiling, the upper limit, like Gay talks about, and I'm just going to screw it up again. So why even try? Yeah. Why even try another relationship? I'm just going to screw it up again, or they're going to cheat on me, or I'll cheat on me, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how we're wired. And that's what we're bumping up against. And that's why facing our dragons and facing these things and doing the healing work can be a game changer. So much here. You have shared so many golden nuggets. And I know that you have a special, well, we should send them to your website. I'm looking, courageintoclients.com, because there's something there that you think would be supportive to this woman. Can you share what that is?
You bet. So it's actually, I would watch it even if you don't have a business or you're looking to get clients. I break down all these 5 dragons. I share my story, kind of my hero's journey. And I just, for about 22 minutes, it's an incredibly well done video sales letter, like literally Hollywood grade video sales letter. That's quite an experience. And it's a storyline of sharing, what happens and why we're resistant and reluctant to step up in our lives and do things. But I go into depth into these 5 dragons and share a little bit about my story too. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, if you have a business or not, I think it'd be a really cool thing for you to watch.
The dragons are dragons. They're
all the
there.
podcasts, though. If you want to go listen to Don Miguel Ruiz or any, Gay Hendricks or JP Sears or Coot Blackson or any of these others, just go to faceyourdragon.com. All the podcasts are there.
Beautiful. Yeah. It'll all be in the show notes. So don't worry if you didn't capture all that, ladies. And Brad, any last words for this woman who is facing some dragons when it comes to love and relationships?
So we got to feel it to heal it. And oftentimes we want to self-medicate and distract ourselves with whatever, shopping, social media. And Coot talks a lot about this too. I have for a long time as well, but stay in the pain, feel the pain, experience, and just make sure you're breathing. You're going to be okay. It's all good, no matter where you're at. And just love yourself in the moment as best you can. Love your anxiety, love your fear, love your frustration. It's okay. Everything is temporary. Emotions are fleeting. And then ultimately just, stay away from, and it's so unfortunate through the pandemic that watched so many people, because they had to feel so much of themselves, became very addicted. So drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, gambling. I mean, a lot of this stuff's a little more masculine, men would do. But the point is, notice when you have that gap between stimulus and response, and just feel that gap. And it's okay to be uncomfortable in that gap. We don't need to go do whatever we're going to do to distract ourselves or addict ourselves or avoid the pain or the discomfort. Just feel it and notice. And we have that moment of choice between stimulus and response to make a better choice.
Bullseye. Beautiful, beautiful. So well said. So well said. Thank you. Thank you for all the wisdom and your sharing vulnerably and everything. Beautiful, beautiful. Really great.
It's my honor, truly.
So thank you. And ladies, a lot was laid down. I hope you have kept breathing through the whole thing and are digesting it. And until we meet again, mwah. One more thing before you go. Have you taken my Discover Your Love Avatar quiz? It's a 2-minute quiz that can help you not only know your strengths, your superpower, because you have one, also identify some of your blind spots, some of the things that might be having you in your fear, having you behaving in ways that aren't in alignment with your highest self, the way you want to be when it comes to dating and relationships. And it'll also help you discover why maybe the stars haven't lined up for you yet. Bottom line is, you take this 2-minute quiz, you get a full report in your email with details on how to move forward in next level love, whether you want a partner or not. So you can go to midlifeloveoutloud.com/love quiz. The link is in the show notes as well. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the station, I'm going to encourage you to do that too, so you don't miss any episodes. And I hope you got a ton out of today's. See you next week. Mwah.